Recently, TF2 Maps had a final control point detailing mini contest. The idea was to take a 4096 by 4096 hammer unit area and make something really cool looking that represents a finale in a map. Basically taking a chunk out of the map, the very end of it, and making the most visually pleasing thing you can. We've held these in the past. It's actually where Cold Front's finale came from, as I think the mid also came from that, a previous detailing contest. So in this video, I'm going to be going through every map entered in this contest and providing it some feedback. I thought this would be really good for everybody to kind of hear because you can get a sense of what I'm seeing and maybe learn something from it. But there's a lot to get to, so we're going to jump right in. Up first is TIERRAVERDE? I think that's how it's pronounced. The first problem I see right away is the HDR on this is very bright. There's a lot of bloom effects happening. Also, I'm noticing a lot of very similar flat planes on the top. Like you can see that the top level of the roofs are just straight across, and it doesn't make for a very visually interesting map. If you break up that a little bit and you put more variation, it could look a lot better. And you've got a lot of vertical space to work with in this contest, so I think that could have been played with. I do think the wooden interiors and supports look nice, though. It's very believable. I really wish there were soundscapes on this map, though. Just the deafening silence drives me nuts, and it's something minor that you could just copy-paste out of another map, and it adds to the overall presentation, and this map is missing it. It ends very abruptly outside of the map, too. I wish there was more to it. A more detailed skybox would have definitely added to the overall feel of this. But overall, it's a pretty cool style. It's not a bad sense of TF2 detailing, I just feel like it needs a lot more polish. And then on to WOLFEN. This has actually a pretty cool presentation for the viewer. I like the flow of how you come out and it expands in a really interesting way. One thing I did notice, though, it's not using TF2 water, which kind of takes me out of the TF2 aesthetic quite a bit. It's got a really cool water flow mechanic that pushes you along the river, and the waterfall is neat, but it could really use more to sell the effect, like a scrolling water texture or something like that. The displacements are also really noisy. This could use so much smoothing, and it would really help the feel of natural terrain, you know, eroded rock over time versus something that's been pulled and dragged around. I've noticed the skybox lighting is really flat. It kind of looks weird. I think the map is just missing fog, and that would help a lot. And also, you could scale up the ground texture so it doesn't loop so obviously. The skybox also has this really nasty seam, which I realize is the texture itself and not something you did, but most maps hide that. It's a bummer that these doors don't work. I feel like you intended this space to be accessible. There's even a way out of it and into more area. And there's some really interesting detailing, like the skybox drain. I like the skybox drain. But they don't work, and it's a bummer. The map does feel very large and takes a good chunk of time to explore, and it's got a really good use of skybox to expand that feeling of size and scale. This is probably the largest feeling map of the contest, which is a pretty big accomplishment. The finale aspect of it feels really forced. It just feels like it's a really neat map with the cart thrown in on a platform at the end with no tracks leading up to it. It does not feel like a finale, and unfortunately this is a finale detailing contest, so that's a pretty big negative to it. Next we have GORGONZILLA. It's really weird that I couldn't go this way. I wish there was some sort of visual barrier. It's right in my face, kind of like I turned around as I spawned, and it's right there, and it's a cool looking area and I can't get to it. I wish there was something blocking my way. There's a really neat UFO above the map here. I just wish it had some more effects to draw the eye to it. It's kind of, you just have this little hole and nothing draws me to look up. I kind of noticed it after I'd run around the map a few times, and I think you could have done more to visually point it out. There's some really strange shadowing on the map. Like the center area is just very, very dark, and it looks like it's the UFO being a dynamic prop casting a shadow over the whole thing, which just turning the shadows off that would have helped a ton. I'm wondering why it didn't come up when you were running around it yourself. But I think it would have added a lot to have that proper lighting in, especially over the entire middle area that is supposed to be the primary, you know, thing you're looking at in the map. The outer areas of the map, these little outside, out of bounds areas, have really nice detailing. I actually really like it. But the interior space feels really lacking. It's very simplistic. There's no supports, and there's just a ton of bare walls. I wish the whole map was detailed to the quality of outside of the map. I will say, though, there is good focus on the control point itself. It is the centerpiece of the map. You've got lighting pointing down at it. You've got a lot of effects. You have a lot of detailing that are all directing the player to it. Unfortunately, the dark lighting takes away from that a lot, but if that issue wasn't there, I think it would work really well. Next, we have Hosomi, I think that's pronounced. Again, it's another very bright HDR map. This bloom just hurts to look at. The interactive cart was a nice touch, but I really wish it had more to it. I felt like we just moved it, it dropped, it was a stock particle effect. There wasn't much interesting happening with it. I think maybe the hatch lifting up or something cool could have happened. It would have presented it a lot better. The map definitely draws you into the finale, though. Everything's pointing to it. It's right here. The minimal skybox above is enough to sell that there's an outside world, but I really feel like something more interesting could have been done with it. I also think there's probably too many textures being used. There's a lot of clashing materials and props, and it just makes things really noisy. No soundscape again here really hurts the map. But I do think the map has a decent look to it, it just needs a lot more refinement. Next we have Moonrat 2. I think this map has a really good industrial interior feel. I like how it's laid out and it feels believable, it feels like something that works in TF2. The exterior lighting, however, once you get outside is a bit flat and I feel like it makes it look a bit bland. I think could be some more dynamics to it, could make it a lot more interesting. This map does have a really good use of sound, the soundscape and effects. There's generators going, there's little effects when you're walking around the map. And that's really good. That's attention to detail that is exactly what you need in a detail map. It's also got a pretty decent skybox that really helps sell that it's part of a larger space. I think this map fits the TF2 art style really well and has a good use of materials without going overboard on variety. I like this one. Next up is PUXORB. This map is actually really good. This has a great use of spy tech, a great use of sound, and a great overall use of the TF2 art style. I could imagine this space being in-game. It's definitely very much a finale as everything is focusing on the point. One specific detailing area that I really appreciate is this area over here. Like the use of particles and ice props really make it feel like a cold room. I love it as a detail area and I kind of want to do something like it now, so it's actually really inspiring to me. Overall, all the round brushwork shows a lot of skill with Hammer. Everything is circling this entire area, which is going to be a huge pain in the ass to build. There's a lot of really interesting complex brushwork on this map. The point itself is a little bit awkward to get to, but visually I think it looks really good. There are some kind of strange, tight, dark hallways that I think could be improved on. Everything overall feels a bit cramped. I think there was a lot of detail crammed in, and it might have benefited more from some breathing room. The whole map is mirrored, and it almost feels like it's a bit of wasted space because you've already seen that detailing. But overall, it still feels really good. I think it's a very believable and well-crafted environment. I think this is probably my favorite from the entries. I do, however, wish this part was solid and I didn't fall through when I tried getting to the point. What are you going to do, though? Next, we have Quantum. The overgrown space base is a really interesting and unique look. I think it's a really cool idea, and I like how you did it. It's got a really good use of the limited space assets. Asteroid not being a finished map, they don't have all the assets done, but you did a good job using what they have. It definitely feels like a finale to a map, and the sound is great on it. I really like how you did it. I do wish you had some kind of visual barrier for these clipped off areas, but I get the idea what you were doing, that this is just the continuation of the map. The grass sprites look really cool on the map, but it detracts a bit when it starts clipping through the different geometry. I also think the full trees in the map feel a bit strange, like how long has this been left to overgrow? But overall, it's a great use of a interesting combination of assets that most people wouldn't think of using. It's a very cool aesthetic, so I give it the thumbs up for sure. On to SMALLBISCUIT. I think this map has a really great use of the Egypt theme. It's good sound overall, and the lighting is really cool without being overly orange. It has a really great feeling to it. It's got some interesting brushwork with the arches, but it is rather small and a bit underwhelming. It looks cool, I just wish there was a lot more of it. I do like how you blocked off the outside areas with rubble. I think you could have probably did a little bit more with it, but visually it shows me that that is the continuation of the map, and you did it in a creative way. And honestly, running around this, it makes me want to make a map in the Egypt theme, so that's got to be a good sign, right? Next is Smiley the Smile. By the way, these are the names of the people making the maps. They had to name them that way. Now that we're this far along, I'll explain that. I think this dark dev texture room was a really weird way to start a detail-oriented map. It doesn't give me a good initial impression. I'm not sure why you decided to make it dev texture when everything else is very detailed, but that was the choice you made. I think the map is very interesting and has a believable sort of gritty look to it, but it is rather dark in spots. Also, I think a big issue is your eye really doesn't get drawn to the point. It's like the point itself is literally covered up by boards. A lot of the detail to one side feels like that should be the focus, this building over here. It's very noisy, it draws your eye away from the capture point itself, which is the opposite of what you should be going for. I do think this map has had a lot of work put into it and is really cool architecture, but it doesn't feel very TF2 to me at all. Like, this graffiti is not TF2. It feels very gritty, it feels very dark, it doesn't feel bright and TF2 like I think it should. So it's close, but needs a bit more. I think lighting would help a lot, and some TF2 style graffiti, if that's what you wanted. Something custom would probably look better here. On to ASG Alligator. This map definitely feels like a finale. That's good. I do think it's rather dark though, and the lighting around the outsides of the point could be better. I do really like this little minimal peek of the outside, showing that it's part of a much bigger world. It tells a really cool story about where you are and why it's so dark and confined. I do think the map is kind of awkward to get around on. I think that could be smoothed out a lot and it would help the presentation. And one specific quirk that I noticed is this stair lighting, like these little strips in the front, is really out of place. It's very blinding almost when you pop up. It like made me startled almost. Overall, I think the map looks really good. It feels very TF2. I just think it needs a little bit more love in the lighting department to really sell it. On to Viperi. I think it's very, very brightly lit. It could use a lot more lighting dynamics. Everything is super bright, super evenly lit. Having some darker spots to contrast the lighter spots could draw your eye more towards places you want it to be drawn. I think it's just a lot of lights thrown in that probably aren't all needed. I do think the map has a really decent spy tech feel and has a good use of materials though. One unfortunate thing is this missing texture pipe really stands out. It's a minor thing, but it really negatively impacts a visual map like this. The map also feels really small. It doesn't feel like there's a whole lot here. It's very confining, and there's not a bigger sense of world around it, which I do think hurts it. It's not bad, I just think it could be better. Next is Beef Bucket. That is a name. Another map that has some bright HDR issues. The bloom is blinding, it hurts. I do think it has really interesting geometry, but some of the material choices are a bit questionable. The map also feels really boxy, with everything just confined to this giant square with, you know, the one side over here and the other side over here and everything in the middle. It doesn't feel like a natural space. I do think it feels like a solid finale though. It feels like something that could be in a map. I think the spy tech is a bit haphazardly thrown in. I think it could be thrown in a bit better way. And the skybox is sort of bland, but visually it still feels very TF2. I just think some better materials could have been used in certain places, but it's not a bad attempt though. Next is Construction Zombie. I think this is a very believable last. I could see this being played on. I feel like there are good gameplay elements to this that really help sell it. There's a great use of materials to it. It looks official quality in a lot of places. I do think the displacements could use more work, but they're good enough to sell the idea of it. Your eye definitely gets drawn to the final, which is exactly what you want. I think there's some really good, solid hints of spy tech thrown around the map, but I do think there is a bit of wasted space in the middle. You could have probably had something there instead of just this big open courtyard. I also feel like you blocked off way too much of the map. I wish I could get to some of these areas without no clipping. I kinda think maybe you didn't do this intentionally, but I do like how you did the under construction look back here to indicate that there was more of the map under construction. It was a creative idea that gets you some bonus points. And last is EXACTOL. I think this map has some really cool storytelling to it, and it's presented in a really neat way. I think it's the most unique entry in this contest. It's got this really cool, ethereal sort of look to it. These particles are really cool on the map, too. I know EXACTOL makes particles, so that's a really good benefit that they have to really sell a good detail entry. I think it has a great use of sound. The waterfall effects are really cool. It's a really, really cool use of the Japan prop pack. And outside of the map, it has the rock props combined with these floating particles, which I believe are actually from Asteroid, unless they're custom made for this, using some of those assets. It gives everything a really cool flowing feel to it, like everything's moving outside of the map, despite it's only the particles moving. The rocks themselves are staying stationary. I also like how the water flows through the map itself. Like it starts up here and it comes down through a waterfall and it drops off the edge of the map. That's a really nice touch to give it some consistency. I think this detail entry is very well detailed and it's very unique and cool, but it doesn't feel like a gameplay space to me at all. It's very linear. It doesn't feel like a finale. It feels like I went up a path to see the last presented to me. It doesn't feel like somewhere I would be actually fighting it. But overall, I think it's a really cool entry, and it's one of my favorites that are entered in the contest. And that is the last map. If you would like to download all these, there is a link in the description below to the post linking the entire pack. If you want to check them out, run around them, provide feedback yourself, that's always appreciated. I'm sure the mappers would love it. Thanks for watching.